Good evening, and thank you for joining us this evening for our overview and summary and feedback session regarding elementary attendance boundary realignment. I'm joined tonight by Mr. Eric Hofstetter, who is our Chief Operations Officer, and Eric's division takes care of so many of the things what makes our school system work outside the classroom: transportation, school nutrition, maintenance, athletics, of course, growth and construction. So, Mr. Hofstetter, thank you for joining us here tonight.
Thank you. It's a pleasure being here.
Again, want to thank all of you for coming in and taking an opportunity to learn a bit more about this process, but also, most importantly, to provide us feedback as we move forward. And you may be asking yourself, hey, how can I provide that feedback? Well, if you would, please go to slido.com, SLIDO.com. Again, SLIDO.com, and we are meeting 6514. Our meeting code, 6514. And we actually have our first question under the polls tab up already for those of you who are logging in to let us know what school you're representing tonight. Is it Abney, Russom, or Shelton? So please, if you haven't done so already, take time and, our first result came in. Take time to go ahead and log into Slido and provide us our feedback. A couple points about that is, one, we will keep Slido open for 1 hour after our meeting this evening. So if you'd prefer to listen to our presentation before responding to the questions, please feel free to do so. But also, you can edit a response in Slido. So please know you've got those options, but again, would love to hear from you, what schools you represent, and again, just giving us that feedback we so much want as we engage in this process. I also want to make sure you're aware of a couple of other areas where you can find out information about the boundary realignment process, and the first is our district webpage. The district webpage is going to be a true resource as we go through this process. You'll find if you go there now, the Planning for the Future site, you're going to see presentations we've made to the board. You're going to see Tuesday night's meeting that we held with our middle school families. You're going to find that there. You're going to find all these resources, and the thing that we want to do for you is, as you share with us tonight your questions, your concerns, we want to be able to provide a frequently asked questions section on that website that we update that are reflective of the questions you have about the process. The other place that you can go is, of course, to email. And our email, as it has been for the last 2 years, is planningforthefuture@paulding.k12.ga.us. You can email questions, concerns, or comments to that email address as well. So we want to provide you with multiple ways to engage with us as we begin the process. And not to repeat myself too much, but really tonight truly is about getting feedback. The one way we'd like to start, and as our responses continue to come in, it looks like we have families from Abney, Shelton, and Russom joining us so far. We want to show you an overview video that can give you kind of a foundation of the process as we begin. And then Eric and I will take the next 30 to 40 minutes to elaborate further and respond to some of your questions, as well as provide you some summary of how you've shared with us with Slido tonight. So at this point, we have a video, and I'd like to thank our communications department for preparing it about boundary realignment process.
The school district's Education Special Purpose Local Option Sales Tax, or ESPLOST, has provided funding for a wide range of projects to improve our schools over the years, including curricular materials, technology hardware, and new construction. In 2019, the school district held a series of community conversations giving stakeholders an opportunity to provide input on the challenge of enrollment growth. By a wide margin, stakeholders chose constructing new schools and new classrooms as their preferred option to address overcrowding in schools. A short time later, the school district held a referendum to renew ESPLOST to continue adding new classrooms in areas where the need is greatest. In November 2019, Paulding County taxpayers overwhelmingly approved the 5-year extension of ESPLOST. 2 projects now nearing completion are a 16-classroom addition at Russom Elementary School and a 22-classroom addition at Moses Middle School, both in the northeast quadrant of Paulding County. The northeast quadrant of Paulding is where the county is experiencing the fastest rate of growth as new construction continues to bring new family housing in neighborhoods. This new development means more and more families will be moving to our county, and in turn, more and more students will be attending Paulding schools. For those who live in Northeast Paulding, bulldozers, turned earth, and new houses under construction are a familiar sight. Multiple developments are in progress right now, and they will add many hundreds of new homes to our community. And there are more developments that have been approved or are in the planning stage. Growth projections show that several schools already are exceeding their planned capacities or will be exceeding capacity in the next few years. Those schools include Abney Elementary School, Shelton Elementary School, and McClure Middle School. The classroom addition at Russom Elementary School will help relieve overcrowding at Abney and Shelton, and the classroom addition at Moses Middle School will help relieve overcrowding at McClure. The issue now is which students will fill those new classrooms. At those 2019 community conversations, it was not surprising that stakeholders cited students changing schools as the most concerning side effect of fixing overcrowding. But they also acknowledged that adjusting attendance boundaries is the most effective way to balance enrollments among schools, and it is the surest way to relieve overcrowded conditions, keep class sizes manageable, and provide a comfortable learning environment for all students. As the Russom and Moses classroom additions near completion in time for the 2021-2022 school year, the school district is conducting an attendance boundary review with the aim of shifting a portion of students from the Abney and Shelton Elementary School attendance zones to the Russom Elementary School attendance zone, and from the McClure Middle School attendance zone to the Moses Middle School attendance zone. Your voice will be an important part of this discussion, and we appreciate that you have decided to participate in tonight's community conversation. This event will be the first step before the school district begins drafting specific options. Once those plans are drafted, you will again have an opportunity to provide input before any final decisions are made. As always, we appreciate your support for strong schools and quality education, and we look forward to the conversation ahead.
I'd once again like to thank our communications department for putting that overview together for us. And there's another group I'd like to thank tonight, because believe it or not, we are truly not in front of the Paulding County Courthouse in downtown Dallas. We're actually here at the district office, but our technology department has worked and done a phenomenal job of assisting us, providing an interactive live stream, so I'd also like to thank them. I want to repeat a couple other things about Slido real quick before we go on. But remember, on Slido, you can edit your responses. If you've made a response, you want to change it, you can. And also, on that left tab, there's a section where you can provide questions. All of our other poll questions are actually located under that right tab for polls. So just to kind of give you an idea of where we're at right now, it looks like the majority of our parents joining this evening are from Shelton Elementary, 53%. Abney at 25%, Russom at 22%. So thank you for joining us tonight. And I know there's probably more out there listening, but please make sure you go into Slido and provide us that feedback. We're actually going to start with a little bit of a history of where we began. And believe it or not, it was 2 years ago that as a district, we engaged you in our initial community conversations. We went out to each of our 5 high schools, invited our entire community to come in. And the purpose of those meetings, much like tonight, was to get your feedback, engage with you, and help us determine a strategic plan phase in order for us to begin dealing with the growth that we know is returning to Paulding County. So that was 2 years ago, and basically much of that community conversation and the feedback that we received in turn became part of our eSPLOS project list. And being thank yous, I wanted to give a huge thank you to our community who supported our eSPLOS initiative. We had a 72% passage rate, and all these dollars that we gather through eSPLOS really go back to supporting our kids' facility development as well as paying off the bond debt, which was part of that program as well. So it all began 2 years ago, getting your feedback, and we're back again tonight now that we've begun SPLOS projects in earnest, which are additions at Russom Elementary School as well as Moses Middle School. So again, tonight is about getting your feedback. And Eric, if you give them a little information about the boundary realignment process.
Absolutely, and thank you for joining us tonight. As you know, all residents of Paulding County are assigned to a school attendance area based on their residential address. Now, when new schools are added, or we start seeing imbalances of enrollment, or additional classroom capacity has become available, then the superintendent may direct staff to review attendance boundaries for evaluation and in potential adjustments.
Right.
And that's why we're here tonight.
You know, and as we go through this, there are a number of criteria that we look at when we talk about boundary realignment. So you'd start talking about the guiding principles that we utilize when we go through the alignment process.
Absolutely. The school system has a strong desire to hear from the community stakeholders long before any type of boundary adjustments or modifications are even developed. And that's extremely important to us. Now, to assist staff and guide them in that process, the following guiding principles are there to assist in organizing this commentary and input from our stakeholders, and we use this throughout the process. The first one of these guiding principles is to prioritize equitable access to high-quality instruction for all children. Our second is to evaluate through a district-wide perspective by considering individual school capacities and student population projections to alleviate overcrowded schools and balance enrollment for now and in the future. Our third guiding principle is to, whenever possible, minimize disruption to the greatest number of students. And lastly is we have to comply with federal and state regulations and of course with our own board policy, JBCCA, and its accompanying regulation, JBCCA-R, which outlines specific actions district staff must take in the development of these potential options.
Absolutely. And as we have our second Slido question up right now, and basically it is asking you, for this attendance boundary review, which guiding principles are most important to you? And again, it's asking you to select two of those. And as we're starting to see results come in, I do want to talk a little more in depth, and they're already, right now so far, minimizing the disruption to the greatest number of students. Well, actually, it's kind of minimizing the disruption and equitable access. So we'll continue to monitor that, and at the end of our presentation tonight, we'll actually show you total results. But Mr. Hofstadter mentioned JBCCA and its regulation JBCCA-R. Those really talk about student assignment to schools. And what I wanted to do is take a few minutes and just talk about the regulation. That's the R part in JBCCA-R. The regulation is truly like the nuts and bolts of how things work. And it deals a lot with choice options we have as a district. One of the choice options that is available deals with students impacted by attendance zone modifications. And you can go to our regulation in our board manual or on our website to review this yourself. But basically, we understand the challenges that are associated with boundary realignment. So we have guidelines that allow parents of students who wish to remain in a school that they may be realigned from to remain in that school as long as classroom space is available. And we also look at that in a prioritized fashion. So if seats available, we'll go from 5th grade first, down to 4th, 3rd, 2nd, 1st, and so on, identifying spots and allowing those to be filled where those spaces are available. If we're in a position where we have to and there's spaces available and there's more people interested, we would go to a lottery. But again, the idea of this is giving parents an opportunity to try to choice at the school they're currently districted to if space is available. And again, this information is found on our board policy manual as well as on our district Planning for the Future website. So please check that out and let us know if you have questions. And Eric, do you want to talk a little bit about secondary criteria? We talked about those primary driving factors. Will you talk some about those secondary criteria we look at?
Absolutely. One of the reasons why we're here tonight, and it is extremely important, is to hear from our stakeholders. So we've developed several criteria that we use as a staff in which we would like our stakeholders to comment on. In addition to this, of course, anything else that they would like to do. And as you can see, we have 3 primary criteria that go into the development. One is geographic proximity, and this includes all types of transportation routes from all parts of the attendance zone that's currently there, including the actual physical site of the school location. And it takes into consideration all the topography such as mountains or rivers or bridges and anything else that might have to do with the location of that school. Our second primary criteria is instructional capacity. This includes all the classroom spaces needed and how much capacity those classrooms can hold to educate the greatest number of students. This also includes all the special programs such as art, music, PE, special education programs, English speakers of other language programs, gifted programs, and any of the other wonderful programs that we offer here in the Paulding County School District. Our third primary criteria is projected enrollment. And it's important to note that we work very closely and in partnership with the Paulding County Planning and Zoning Commission as well as their Economic Development Office. We look at things such as housing data, residential starts, construction, commercial data, and any kind of thing that impacts overall population statistics within the county, and of course how that impacts the school. And that partnership works very well, and we exchange lots of information.
Absolutely.
And from all that, we use that with other known formulas on how to project enrollment based on traditional enrollments. And all that kind of goes in together, and that's how we try to figure out over the next 4 to 5 years what we project enrollments to be at each one of our schools.
Absolutely.
Okay. Now, those are the primary criteria, but whenever a situation exists that takes into consideration more than one of the primary criteria, such as what we're dealing with now, we have developed several secondary criteria. The first of these is safety and traffic patterns. This takes into consideration all the accessible routes from the current attendance zone. And again, it looks at how many intersections, traffic signals, is it a 2-lane road, 4-lane road, and any other safety considerations as far as entering the campus, how much space there is to maneuver around the campus, parking, and we look at all those things in its whole. Our next criteria is previous redistricting, and it is the goal of the school district not to redistrict the same group of folks, our same parents or houses, once at least every 4 years. And I know we've been able to hold true to that now for almost 10 or 11 years since I think there's been any kind of redistricting that has occurred.
And that's become important to us because in the late 90s and early 2000s, because of just the massive growth that was coming into the county, we would have students who might even be redistricted in successive years. So we really want to put a plan together that has some longevity to it for our students.
Absolutely. Another criteria is how we balance special programs, and whenever possible, it is the school system really desires not to create a disproportionate amount of special programs at any one school. That way we help provide that equitable access for all. Another one is our school feeder alignment, and when possible and where possible, we try to align the elementary, middle, and high school feeder boundaries, which presents many challenges in and of itself.
Yes.
Our next one would be intact neighborhoods. Now this could be a subdivision, a traditional known neighborhood, or any other type of traditional location identifier of a community. And what we try to do is all the folks in that known zone, if possible and where possible, all those children would go to the same school or be assigned to the same attendance zone. So it is very important, if we can, to try to keep those neighborhoods intact when possible. And lastly, we have to look at the overall efficient and economical operations. And this is all the different factors that go into us being fiscally responsible for the county and the taxpayer.
Right. So we have our third question up on Slido right now, and it really is about what our secondary criteria are important to you. So as you're going through your Slido poll, please take a minute to start responding to that. Just letting us know kind of where your priorities lie, because that again helps us. This whole night is about hearing from you before we start really looking at this process in terms of maps and roads and lines. So please take a minute, give us your feedback there as well as we look at what those secondary criteria that are important to you. And right now, our responses are showing that intact neighborhoods are an area of importance for you. School feeder pattern alignment, safety and traffic patterns appear to be the top 3 right now, and we all know the area that we're talking about. Traffic, of course, is a common issue that we're dealing with. But again, keep those responses coming. We'll come back and summarize at the end and show what those final results are, but appreciate you sharing your thoughts with us tonight. So Eric, if you would drill down a little bit more now and talk about our focus areas tonight.
Okay, that's one of the reasons why that is the reason why we are here, is that there has been classroom space added on at Russom Elementary, so that requires us to look at all the different area schools and see if there's some imbalances of enrollment in which it can exist. And we do know, and as you can see on the chart, our focus area tonight is centered on these elementary school attendance zones. With Abney Elementary School already over capacity, having stressed roads, and a site that cannot accommodate additional construction, and in Shelton Elementary, which is already at capacity, even with its recent addition, and there's an expectation for some additional growth to continue to happen, it was incumbent for the district to construct additional space in the area. Now again, in collaboration with county planning and zoning and an assessment of our own current school facilities, it became apparent to construct additional classroom space at Russom Elementary School. Russom Elementary School has the available land and required core areas to construct additional classroom space, and in this case it was 16 classrooms, which increases the overall capacity from 875 students to, with the classroom addition, 1,125 students, thus providing potential enrollment balancing possibilities for the Abney and Shelton school attendance zones, as well as accommodating growth within its own current attendance zone based on our current four-year projections.
And again, as you know, the construction we're talking about, again, is an effort to relieve some of the overcrowding that we're seeing here in the northeastern and northwestern sections of our community. But Eric, could you talk a little bit about growth in general?
Absolutely. And here's a chart here, and as we zoom in on it, it's a little bit easier for our viewers to see. So again, working closely with county planning and zoning, we're currently tracking approximately 50 known developments, and these are all residential developments, all throughout this focus area. Now this map here provides a visual overview of these developments with the most recent information we have, which is actually as of right about the first of the year. And it's important to note that this information can and it does change. So it is a very fluid amount of information that we have to continue to consider within our planning. Now, many of these developments are at different stages, and that's indicated by the following markers, again, which can change as developers change up some of their plans. The orange markers here are current developments that are in progress. There is building underway, and that they are selling homes, and they're continuing towards the build out of the entire development. We expect this to continue on in the orange markers from now through about the next 4 years until most of them reach build out. Now, the blue markers represents those developments that have submitted plans to planning and zoning. So they are doing or in a process of pre-construction design, which takes a couple of years in order to start building houses. And again, we use these blue markers to signify those developments which will probably begin, we expect housing construction to actually begin somewhere between 2 and 5 years from now. Indicated by the purple markers are those known developments that have already been zoned with lots. However, there have been no plans submitted, nor do we know much about those discussions with those plans. So we assume those, we won't see any type of real construction, at least for now, somewhere about at least for 5 years, maybe a little bit longer. And lastly, we have the yellow markers, which indicate active adult communities. Now these are communities where at least 80% of the community must own houses that are at least age 55 and over. So the owners of the house have to be at least 55, and 80% of those houses have to be owned by owners who are at least 55 years old. Now, while there's very little impact from those developments, we do see school-age children live in these active adult communities.
So it's important for us to keep our eye on those as well.
That's correct. That's correct.
So why are we showing you this data? There's a couple of really strong reasons. One is you're seeing this happen in your community. You're seeing new developments pop up. You're seeing houses being built at a very rapid rate. But we also wanted to show that we are working with our county to really identify developments that are not only 2 to 5 years away, but 5 years or more. So this can really be a comprehensive look at our county.
That's right.
That we're working with our commissioners, and one of the things I wanted to mention is thanking our commission chair, Mr. Carmichael, as well as our other commissioners. Just within the last probably 6 months, Eric, we've been actually asked to have an advisory role on planning and zoning. Now, what does that mean? That means that we're involved in conversation with what's happening at planning and zoning, that we're getting information that's going to help us better plan for the future. And that really is important to us, and we have not had that kind of seat in quite some time. So it's been very beneficial, and I'd like to thank planning and zoning as well as our commission chair and our commissioners for having us at the table with them, listening to what's really happening in terms of growth in our community. And so really we want to show that we're looking at what's coming. And this is not a one-year solution, but really we're having to look way out into the future in terms of how we're going to manage growth that's coming to Paulding County.
Right. And that's correct. And as you can see on the map, probably one of the big takeaways is you'll see going up the Ivy Gulch, Seven Hills Boulevard, Cedar Crest area, there's a lot of density and there's a lot of developments happening right there. And of course, anybody who drives sees all the bulldozers and they see the land being turned. But also, if you notice in the current Russom attendance zone, there's not quite as much happening, again, which makes Russom the ideal spot for the classroom addition.
Yeah, we see Russom as kind of an area that's essentially built out in terms of new construction. But Eric and I spend a lot of time actually in the car, and we drive these developments and actually look. We'll go back into phase 3s of developments. You see from the road phase 1 and 2, but in the back there's a new phase being built, so that we can also keep an eye on how fast projects are moving in terms of building in the county. You know, when you go in Riverwood now, you'll see that Riverwood's building out. There's other phases across from Moses Middle School that are entering new phases of construction. So we really are committed to keeping a pulse on where building is in the county. One of the things I want to do right quick is remind you guys, if you have questions, Planning for the Future at paulding.k12.ga.us is a vehicle for you to provide us questions, concerns, or feedback really at any time through this process. So if you have a question after Slido closes an hour after this meeting, you can always send those to that email address. Also, check frequently our website. That's where we'll provide you updates, frequently asked questions, as well as items like this. We'll have this recording there for folks who may have not had an opportunity to review it, to go back and be able to see it. But I also want to take you through the poll questions themselves, and some that I want to make sure you take an opportunity to answer. Under that poll section, for example, there's an area where you can provide responses to what are your concerns about this process. You can take time to provide us that answer, that narrative answer to that. Also, are there things that we've not mentioned that we need to consider? So please take some time. So you don't have to have it all finished before the end of this program tonight, but make sure that you take an opportunity to share what those things you might want us to be aware of. The other is, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate the information and presentation of this boundary review community conversation? We want to be able to engage as many of our community as possible. And we know in the COVID environment we're currently living and working in, it's not possible to have large crowds. So we want to know from you, is this a vehicle, is this a way that we can communicate effectively with you to give and receive feedback? And also, we would like to know if you think this is how we should deliver future boundary realignment conversations. So please make sure, you don't have to rush, but please make sure you take time to respond to all those questions. But also, speaking of questions, that left tab on Slido is just an area where you can ask questions. So please make sure you're taking that time to really get us your feedback and thoughts. So right now I'm going to take you through what our initial results from our Slido poll. What school does your child or children attend? Tonight we have 43% from Abney, 41% from Shelton, and 16% from Russom. Again, thank you for joining us tonight. Our second Slido poll question was, for this attendance boundary review, which guiding principles are most important to you, and select no more than 2. So far, much like our Tuesday night conversation around middle and middle school, it's really minimizing disruption to the greatest number of students, and really very closely with it providing equitable access to high-quality instruction for all children are those two guiding principles that are showing the most trending data. Our next question was about those secondary criteria, and much like Tuesday night, intact neighborhoods is, again, what seems to be that priority. Showing school feeder alignment, safety and traffic patterns, balancing of special programs, efficient and economical operations, and followed there kind of at the end, really concerned about those previous redistricting. So now we have had an opportunity for you to ask us some questions. So I think we've got some of those ready. But our first is, I believe it's, what happened to the idea of constructing a new school on the Seven Hills Connector? That is actually one of the first, one of the questions we got Tuesday night, which was most specifically about a middle school. As you know, a new school is part of our SPLOST 6 program. We're now in the planning and design phase, and Eric, I don't know if you want to talk just a little bit about that.
Right. Well, it takes almost 36 months to plan and construct and open a middle school. We're currently in what they call pre-design construction, so we have to evaluate all the ground of the site.
Absolutely.
Surveys, all kinds of things that go on.
Borings.
The State Department of Education has a risk hazard assessment that we have to complete, which requires lots of types of engineering reports. All that is currently underway and in process. Yeah. So as soon as that information comes back, then we start working with architects on, what the actual site can hold, how big a school, and all the other things that architects need in order to begin that design.
So to answer that question, we're in process. Our second question here, is there a plan to pull Unite Seven Hills into one elementary school? Is it tough? It is tough on my kids that only one section goes to a different elementary school. So my answer to that, much like the other night, is as we have neighborhoods split, it also allows us an opportunity to bring neighborhoods together. So really it's too early for us to provide you specific commentary because we haven't put lines on a map. But just as we try to avoid splitting up neighborhoods, if there's opportunity to rejoin, we'll of course absolutely look at that. This next question is, during the second phase of community conversation, what kind of input will we be able to give? And similar to this or voting on the new lines. So our second phase is, and again, just being completely honest with you, it could be one draft of a boundary realignment or perhaps another draft. So we would come to you, we would show you and provide rationale for where boundary lines have been placed, and then allow you an opportunity to give us feedback. And again, I think the most important feedback from us, although the Slido poll questions, kind of getting an idea of where you stand, we really want that specific feedback. So we would be looking for specific feedback at that point and provide a vehicle for you to provide that. Most commonly, people will write us at our email address, planningforthfuture@paulding.k12.ga.us. But at that second meeting, we would give you either one or perhaps multiple options that we would seek your feedback on. What assumptions, if any, do you have in regards to what kind of outcome may take, I'm sorry, is that right, Eric? What final outcome may take, especially in how it affects the Seven Hills community? I think I would just refer back to that last question. Again, it would come in February where we'd be able to provide some sort of outlook. So really, you're looking at our next meeting, you'd have some idea of what those initial either individual plan or multiple plans may look like. Will students that are currently school choice to these schools be allowed to continue? That is a component of school choice, so the answer to that is yes. And what someone is probably talking about in that scenario is, and I'll just use Russom as an example. My school, I currently live out of the Russom attendance boundary, but I've school choice to Russom. No matter what happens with this, would I be allowed to stay? And school choice is for the extent that you are in that grade band, whether it be K5, 6, 8, 9, 12, so that would stay in place. Will the redistricting of students be based on distance miles from home to school locations. And Eric, that's something I know you touched on. It, of course, will be a factor when we look at a realignment, but it's not the only factor.
That's correct.
And one of the challenges that we have, and Eric, we talk about this quite a bit, is that northwestern part of the community and connectivity that we have in terms of roads.
That's right.
Because we do have to operate our transportation fleet efficiently. We don't want kids on a bus for an inordinately long period of time. As a matter of fact, realignment should reduce that amount of time that students are on a bus, but it is one of other criteria that we look at.
It is. Yeah.
If we have multiple children at Shelton but get zoned to Russom, will we be able to choose to keep our kids at Shelton? And what I refer you to there is that JBCCA-R. That is that regulation, the nuts and bolts that we talked about earlier, that talks about the request to remain process. And that would really be contingent on the number of available spots there were at Shelton. And again, that's prioritized 5th, 4th, 3rd, 2nd, 1st, and then of course kindergarten at the end. I think we have one more. I think this, I can read this as, I believe, Amy. Will any of the redistricting impact attending North Paulding High School at all in the next 10 years? The next 10 years, I really, just being quite honest, and I would say this in the meeting, 10 years really can't address that. That level, that time period would be very difficult for me to say that 10 years from now, this wouldn't be impacted. But what I would tell you for the 2021-22 school year, which is what we're talking about specifically, that this realignment would take place for the 2021-22 school year at the elementary and middle school level. There will be no impact at North Paulding High School. As we talked about in our SPLOS program, of course, one of our goals is to build that middle school and then relieve North Paulding in terms of the large number of students attending there now. Okay. Those were great questions, and as you keep bringing them in, we'll use these again to help us create that frequently asked questions, so you guys kind of have that one place where you can go and find answers to questions you have about realignment. But what I wanted to close out with here tonight, and again, our goal is to keep you here 35, 45 minutes, is where do we go from here? So where we go from here is, and just to give you a little history, in November, we presented the process to our Board of Education. In December, we came back with a communication engagement program, and really tonight is the first of those engagement meetings. And I want to stress again that tonight is really about hearing from you. So we're going to hear from you. We're going to take that data as long as the other criteria that we're going to have to look at. And in February, for Conversation 2, we'll come back to you with either, as I said, it could be 1 or 2 models, and ask for your feedback, specific feedback again. Then in March, after we've received that feedback, we come back with that finalized draft of what that realignment program may look like. Receive feedback again, and then the goal ultimately would be to make a final recommendation to our Board of Education in April. So what we're really looking at here is what started as really a 5-month process. We have our first engagement opportunity with you here tonight. We're going to come back to you in February and then come back to you in March before making any final recommendation to our Board of Education. So, as we kind of close out tonight, please, again, all those poll questions, please talk about the event, how we shared with you tonight, how you rate that, but also the concerns you have about the process and things we may need to be considering as we move forward with boundary realignment. So, for Mr. Hofstetter and myself, from all of us at the school district.
Thank you.
Really appreciate the opportunity to share with you tonight. Just an opportunity to get your feedback as we move on in these next steps of the boundary realignment process. So again, remember the webpage, Planning for the Future at paulding.k12.ga.us, and of course, please take a time for the next hour while Slido's open to give us your feedback. Thank you and have a great night.
Good night.